Bandages, tourniquets, surgery kits and painkillers. There are a whole heap of meds in Escape from Tarkov, and you need to learn which are best in order to increase your survival rate in raids. Let's talk about all of the meds in the game and which ones you should take into every single raid. I'm Gaz, welcome to the channel. If you enjoy this video or find it helpful, leave a like and subscribe for more. I'm interested to hear which meds you swear by, the ones you'll never go into a raid without. Leave me a comment, I wonder how our opinions will differ. Anyway, let's break this down. There is a lot of nuance as to when each item is the best to take into a raid with you. For example, before you have access to anything higher than level 1 therapist and the flea market, there's a good chance you'll be going in with an AI2, bandage, splint, S-march and painkillers. That's a solid loadout for under level 10. However, once you open up therapist level 2 and beyond, as well as the flea market, meds are cheap and you're spoiled for choice as to your best med loadout. Here's a list of every med in Tarkov grouped into categories depending on what they do. I'll be covering stims in a different video, so stick around if you're interested in that one. To start with, there's your standard healing items. We've got the AI2, which restores 100 hit points, the car first aid kit, which restores 220, the IFAK, which restores 300, the Salewa, which restores 400, and the Grizzly, which restores 1600. But it's not as black and white as that, as these items also heal other ailments at the cost of their total resource pool. They also take up different amounts of space in your inventory. A quick note here, the values in this list are subject to and have changed a lot. Battlestate are constantly rebalancing meds to ensure more variety in which items players choose to bring in. An AI2 takes up one slot, takes 2 seconds to use and only heals 100 points. It will, in the future, also remove radiation exposure when this is added to the game. Next, we have a medkit that is so forgettable I almost forgot to add it to the list. The car first aid kit. This thing takes up 2 slots, takes 3 seconds to use, has a health pool of 220 and can heal light bleeds at a cost of 50 points. There is almost no reason to use this kit over an IFAK or Salewa, so don't even worry about this one. The IFAK, also a 1 slot item, takes 3 seconds to use, but can also heal both light and heavy bleeds at a cost of 30 HP and 210 HP respectively. As a rule of thumb, as this only has 300 HP to begin with, I'll never use the IFAK to heal heavy bleeds, but will almost exclusively use one for light bleeds. Once again, this will remove radiation exposure when this feature is added. The Salewa also heals both light and heavy bleeds at a cost of 45 HP and 175 HP. This is much more manageable than the IFAK, especially as the HP pool is 400. It also has a use time of 3 seconds. The biggest downside to the Salewa is that it is more expensive than the IFAK, more on prices later, and is a 2 slot item. The Grizzly is a 4 slot item and not one that is usually carried in raid. It has a health pool of 1800 and quite a lengthy use time of 5 seconds. If you do choose to take this one into a raid, you'll benefit from its huge health pool and the ability to heal light and heavy bleeds, as well as fractures for very reasonable resource costs of 40 HP, 130 HP and 50 HP respectively. It also removes contusions and, once again, will remove radiation exposure when this feature is added. It's a great kit on paper, and probably not an awful choice if you're going into PvP and not to loot, but a healing time of 5 seconds per limb can really add up if you've got lots of limbs to repair. Those were the medkits. Now we'll steamroll through the other categories which are going to be less important overall, before I tell you which meds you should be taking in and give you my personal med loadout. But first, I know a lot of people who are watching this aren't subscribed. If you're finding this guide helpful or enjoyable, you'll probably want to stick around. I create guides like this multiple times a week. Like the video and leave a comment too. It really helps my channel get pushed into YouTube's wild algorithm and shows YouTube that my content is worth recommending. Thanks so much for the support. Okay, let's change up the pace here and look at splints, bandages and tourniquets. All of these items are single slot items, so this won't be a factor of which is better. There are 2 kinds of splints in Escape from Tarkov, and both do exactly the same job when it comes to removing fractures. There's only a couple of differences between the two, but they're pretty big. Firstly, the regular splint is a single use compared to the alu splint, which has 5 uses. Secondly, and possibly surprising to some of you, the regular splint takes 5 seconds to use, whereas the alu splint only takes 3. There is a slight nuance to this argument when you factor in that the Grizzly also heals fractures, but again, Grizzlies are never going to be recommended by me. I think it's pretty obvious which splint I'd recommend here, but I'll save that for the end of the video, where we'll also talk about the cost and availability of items. Next up, we'll look at bandages. If you thought there was nuance to the question of splints, it's tenfold here. Firstly, both of these bandages do the same job in stopping light bleeds, but the army bandage has 2 uses compared to the single use of a regular bandage. But you're probably not going to be using bandages for very long at all. This is because every medkit, apart from one, has the ability to stop light bleeds for pretty cheap. It's just not space effective to carry around a bandage and a Salewa, for example, as the amount of light bleeds you get in Tarkov is minimal, especially with the introduction of the heavy bleed mechanic. In short, don't bother with bandages, they're a waste of time unless you're using an AI2 and can't afford an IFAK or Salewa. Tourniquets and blood clotters are up next, and much like splints and bandages, both items do exactly the same job, which is to heal heavy bleeds. The S-March is a single-use item that takes 5 seconds to use, where the hemostat has 3 uses and takes 3 seconds. While your main first aid kits will heal heavy bleeds, you don't want to gamble on either not having enough health left in them to stop the bleeding, or taking a significant bite out of their resource pool. Instead, I'll always recommend grabbing an S-March or hemostat, though I think the latter is infinitely better, as when I get heavy bleeds there always seems to be more than one of them. We'll take a brief look at painkillers, which allow you to walk or aim more accurately with broken or black limbs, but players nearly always make their mind up on which painkillers to use, based on what they are actually doing. Your basic painkillers have 4 uses, a use time of 3 seconds, and a duration of 80 seconds. They will also remove 17 points of hydration. Not a great deal to say about these other than that they are a solid choice for budget kits, as they'll keep you going long enough to escape a battle you aren't prepared for, and they're cheap. Then there's ibuprofen painkillers. These are more expensive, but are infinitely more beneficial with 15 uses per pack. They have a use time of 5 seconds and a duration of 280 seconds. Ibuprofen also removes contusions and will cost you 15 hydration to use. These are one of the better painkillers in the game when it comes to cost to benefit. You get 15 uses, which, if you put them in your secure container, could last you 20 raids or more. Then we've got Augmentin. These guys are very expensive, and I'm not too sure why. They are a single use item, take 5 seconds to use, and remove pain for only 150 seconds. They do, however, increase your energy by 5, remove toxication, and give you +1 to your immunity skill for 300 seconds. I'm pretty sure these are used in a barter trade, which is what's causing the price to be so elevated. Don't buy these. One of the most popular painkillers is Vaseline. It's got 6 uses, takes 6 seconds to use, but lasts for 300 seconds. It does come at a cost of -5 energy and hydration though, compared to the -15 hydration of some of the others. Another popular but very pricey painkiller is the Golden Star Balm. This med has 10 uses with a 7-second use time, but a duration of 350 seconds. One of the things that makes this painkiller so appealing is a small window of hydration and energy recovery after the initial -15 hit to energy. I personally don't use this one, as it's a bit over the top in price in my opinion, and there is plenty of food and water in the world of Tarkov, meaning there's less risk to energy and hydration using some of the others. And finally for painkillers, we've got morphine. Morphine is a single use item, but has a 2-second use time with a 300-second duration. It's great for quickly popping a painkiller in the middle of a battle if you don't have time to use any other meds. It does, however, remove 15 points of hydration and 10 points of energy, so think wisely before popping it. And our last category is one that a whole video could be made surrounding: surgery kits. There are 2 kits to look at here, the CMS and Serve 12. Starting with the CMS, it is a 2-slot item with 5 uses and a use time of 16 seconds. With both of these kits, your surgery skill now plays a big role in how much health you can recover from a black limb. With the CMS kit, the base level is somewhere between 24 and 29 of the limb's maximum HP pool restored. Bear in mind this will not heal the limb, just make it so that medkits will once again be usable to recover it back to some percentage of its usual maximum health. As you level this skill by using the surgery kits, you'll gradually restore a higher health pool to each limb. It's a complex equation, so just bear in mind that, regardless of skill, any recovered limbs will be more vulnerable to being blacked again as they will have less total HP. The Serve 12 kit is a 3-slot item that has 15 uses and will take 20 seconds to heal each limb. The same rule applies here as the CMS kit, though the Serve 12 will also heal fractures and will grant a larger maximum health pool than its competitor. There's a heated debate about which of these kits to use, and the majority of players I've seen come down on the side of the CMS. This is largely due to it being cheaper and smaller, as it's a kit you'll likely want to keep in your secure container. Remember, a large portion of the player base do not have the Edge of Darkness edition, which starts you off with the 3x3 Gamma container which can hold a Serve 12. Instead, the 2x2 Alpha container users will likely prefer the CMS, which fits in there. Okay then, this is turning into a much longer video than I first thought. I'm going to give you an example of my go-to med items to take into a raid, and give a justification of why, taking prices and space into account. If you're still watching, I'm going to assume you've already unlocked the flea market. If you haven't, I'll stand by my initial point in the video and recommend the AI2, Bandage, Splint, Painkillers and S-March. So, as I have the Edge of Darkness edition and the Gamma container by proxy, here's my med loadout, most of which will sit in the secure container at least initially. For healing, my preference is the IFAK. I like having the 300 health pool and the ability to heal light bleeds without too much worrying about how much it might cost. A lot of players might choose the Salewa here for its higher health pool and the ability to heal heavy bleeds, but I find it to be too expensive to the item's HP. Instead, I pair the IFAK with a Hemostat. These two items take up the same amount of space as a Salewa and have the ability to be shifted in and out of my secure container depending on which items I feel I need to prioritise. These two items combined also cost around the same as a Salewa at between 23 and 25k. Then I take an Alu Splint. I find these to be much more valuable to me than a regular Splint as they shield against more than one break. For example, if you jump off a rock or a building that's slightly too high and break both of your legs, you're in a tricky situation with a single Splint and will be relying on Painkillers till you find another one or until you leave the raid. An Aloe Splint costs between 12 and 14k, which is a bit more expensive, but you can easily recoup this money if you find a single slot item in raid to swap it out for. For Painkillers, I always default to ibuprofen. This is for a couple of reasons, the most important being that they last 280 seconds versus the 80 seconds of regular painkillers. They are also a 15 use item, so it's convenient for me to leave them in my inventory until they're down to 3 uses or so, when I'll vendor them to therapist and grab another bottle. I'm not too worried about the hit to hydration from these either, as food and water is everywhere in Tarkov. Finally, for survival kit, I'm obviously going to choose a CMS kit, as it does everything this Serve 12 does, minus some extra healing, but it takes up 2 slots instead of 3. The price difference here isn't massive, but even if the CMS was more expensive, I'd still probably lean towards it. To build out this medkit for a raid, you'll probably spend 100k or more. However, as these will start in your secure container, there's no risk of losing them, and by the time you've taken them out of your container, you'll most likely have replaced them with something even more valuable and made your money back on them. Let me know if your opinion lines up with mine here. There's a lot to digest in this video, so sound off in the comments if you made it this far and learned something. If you did make it this far, I'd say I've earned a like, wouldn't you? Subscribe and never miss a video from me. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.